Hi everyone, Sean from Lines and Wax back at you with another discography ranking video. This time I'm talking about the English legends of extreme metal, Napalm Death. I can't really call them a grindcore band anymore. They've kind of transcended that genre a long time ago. But yeah, Napalm Death started as like the grindcore band that broke out. Like they made that style into a real thing that was like accepted in the mainstream of all places. And even though it kind of got mocked a lot in the British press, but fuck the British press, I'm here today to talk about Napalm Death's illustrious career. They've had high points, they've had low points, they've had a few middling points as well, and some interesting places along the way as well. Has Napalm Death been? They've had a bazillion 100,000 members. They're probably one of the only bands that gets a pass for not having original members, because those early days were chaos. It was more of a collective almost than a band, and when things solidified into the lineup that they had, or the lineups that people know, it was already too late at the point. There was already no original lineup, so they get a pass. But yeah, Napalm Death have done everything from flat out grindcore to just like brutal, like really old school kind of death metal, and into all this weird kind of groovy new metal, kind of almost new metal kind of stuff they did in the 90s. And then since then they've been back to their grindcore roots. They've done, even now they're doing this like stuff that can really be called their own sound. There's nobody else that really sounds like Napalm Death at the moment. They bring like all this Sonic Youth, Swans kind of no wave stuff, and they mash it into like their weird brand of grindcore and death metal, and they mix it all together, and it really sounds like nothing else. So yeah, let's get into that. This is going to be an interesting one. And I've seen a few of these Napalm Death ranking videos, and I already know mine is going to be quite different to some of the others that I've seen online, because I am, I'm a grindcore guy. What can I say? So that might alienate some of the other fans of Napalm Death, but here we go. Let's get into the ranking then. It's a long ranking. Napalm Death don't have that much in the way of live recordings, really. They have one or two, but they have a bunch of EPs and compilations and splits and stuff, which I've left out for timing's sake. So we're just going to talk about studio albums, and there's 16 of them, and we're going to start with the worst and rank it all the way through to the best. So the worst Napalm Death album, in my opinion, in at number 16, is 1998's Words from the End. Can't even fucking say it. It's 1998, fucking hell, 1998's Words from the Exit Wound. Now, so this is like bang in the middle, or right at the end actually, of their groovy like new metal, groove metal, whatever the fuck you want to call it, 90s period, in which I really struggled to get into this stuff. As I worked through the Napalm Death discography as a teenager, starting with the grind into the death metal, and then they kind of developed into this, and this is right at the arse end of that run of like slow, groovy, kind of almost also melodic metal, which really, to be honest, Napalm Death did this for so long that it'd be wrong for me to say that it's not their sound, but it's not their sound, not for me. So Words from the Exit Wound is the last in a line of 4 albums, and it's the worst of those 4 albums in that style, in my opinion. There are far worse albums out there by other bands, but Words from the Exit Wound is like the low point for me as far as Napalm Death goes. It has no redeeming quality to it. Very similar to it, and just a little bit better, but only just, is number 15, Inside the Torn Apart. Again, similar kind of thing. It was released in 1997, a year before, and I get the feeling that Words from the Exit Wound was just leftover songs from Inside the Torn Apart. I have no evidence to suggest that at all, but that's how it feels. These records get progressively worse as the 90s go on, and in 1997, Inside the Torn Apart, it has its moments, but as I said, it's slow, groovy, kind of, the 90s were a mire for metal in a lot of ways, and Napalm Death definitely fell into that trap too. Inside the Torn Apart is not great, to be honest. In number 14, again, is Diatribes, another record from the 90s, this one in 1996, so you might have noticed a recurring theme here. As the 90s go on, the records get worse. This is the second record in a string of 4, Diatribes in 96. Interesting. This is probably the most commercial sounding. It's probably the most Napalm Death record, even though Barney is obviously roaring all over this thing. It takes the groovy stuff they did in the 90s and it makes it into this really like polished kind of commercial sound, and that just doesn't work for Napalm Death. It isn't as uninspired or as maybe droll as Inside the Tone Apart and Words from the Exit Wound, but Diatribes is definitely another low point in the career of Napalm Death. It's not as bad as the other two, and it's really interesting because it's a record that sounds nothing really like Napalm Death. So it's interesting from that perspective, and it does have probably their most catchy and probably most commercial song, that being Greed Killing, as its single. But other than that, and really cool cover art as well. Other than that, there's not really any redeeming factors for Diatribes, to be honest with you. In number 13th place, then, and you've probably already guessed it, if you're familiar with Napalm Death's discography, in 13th is Fear, Emptiness, Despair from 1994, the first in the string of, again, I feel like I'm overusing the term, groove metal records that Napalm Death did. So they kind of came out of the old school death metal style and then into this new kind of groovy style that was more in tune with the 90s, was like stuff like Fear Factory almost, but obviously not as precise with the laser sharp precision that Fear Factory had. It was that kind of vibe, that heavy, chunky 90s sound. They started with that on Fear, Emptiness, Despair in 1994. Now, Fear, Emptiness, Despair does have a lot of good songs on it, even though it begins a downward trend for Napalm Death, and the art is appalling. It does have good songs. Twist the Knife Slowly was on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which no doubt did them many favors. It was also released as a collaboration between Uric Records and Columbia, so this was Napalm Death's major label debut, as it were, and I think the sound may be changed to reflect that. I don't know. There's a far cry between this and what they were doing earlier on. But like I said, it's not quite as drudgery. It's not quite a drudgery as the later quote unquote groove metal records that the band would do throughout the 90s. Like I said, and I've said earlier in the video, and I'll probably say it again at some point, is that the 90s were the low point for Napalm Death. In my opinion, they were a band that struggled to find an identity after changing their identity so much throughout the 80s and early 90s that they kind of fell into this like rut in the 90s of fairly monotonous music. But Fear, Emptiness, Despair is the best of the bad bunch. You've got songs like Twist the Knife, Hung, Plague Rages, and the excellent Armageddon ×7, which is a hell of a song title. Armageddon ×7 is 7. What makes 7 Armageddons so brutal? Why not 6? Why not 8? Why Armageddon ×7? I don't know. I don't really care. But it's a good album for what it is. But in the Napalm Death canon, there's far, far better. And from this point onwards, now this is where things are generally pretty good quality. And I've just rated them in order of my favoritism. But from this point onwards, everything is generally really, really high quality. In number 12, then, is Enemy of the Music Business. It is considered a return to form, to their grindcore roots, after this string of 90s slow, sludgy albums that I spoke about just now. Then 2 years afterwards, from the Exit Wound, the worst of the bunch, bam, they come back with Enemy of the Music Business. They bring more of that early grindcore sound into their into their songwriting, and things become immediately more frenetic and immediately more just chaotic. And this is the beginning. The seed is planted here for the trajectory that Napalm Death would take from this point. They've really latched onto this sound that first appears on Enemy of the Music Business in a very primitive form, and that's why it's so far down the list, as it were. But this sound then develops over the records that followed in those years after Enemy in the Music Business, and it really turns into something special. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Enemy in the Music Business, a good return to form record, but not the best thing in the world. Number 11 is Utilitarian from 2012, and this is at the opposite end of that streak. In the Enemy of the Music Business in the year 2000 begins the streak, and in Utilitarian kind of is just there in 2012 and kind of puts a bit of a full stop or a comma in their streak. It's not bad. There's some really cool singles on it. And John Zorn comes into this with a fucking saxophone. The single "The Wolf I Feed" is another actually very catchy Napalm Death song, and features some of the best vocals from both the guys who do the vocals in Napalm Death, and it is a really good song. So it's not bad. It just, compared to the others in front of it now, Utilitarian is a strange one in that it's a modern Napalm Death record that kind of just fell off the radar a bit because it didn't really do anything exciting, but still a good Napalm Death album. In 10th place is Order of the Leech. Now, Order of the Leech is the, like I said, return to the grindcore sound that started on Enemy of the Music Business, but really comes to the forefront in 2002's Order of the Leech. They really throw it back out there. The fucking scatterfuck fucking grindcore fucking blast beats are all over this fucking thing. Barney turns from a growling cookie monster into a fucking shrieking banshee with like literally no warning. This is fast, it's furious, it's absolutely fucking blistering, grinding death metal, I guess. I sell this to you. Order of the Leech is fucking fantastic, and it's 10th, so you get an idea of where I'm going with this Napalm Death stuff. This is album number 10 out of 16, and it's in 10th place up the ranking. It's fucking amazing. In number 9 is Apex Predator Easy Meat, where that chaotic, fucking crazy 2000s era Napalm Death stuff finally begins to thaw out. After the misstep of Utilitarian, you get Apex Predator Easy Meat, where, strangely, these clean vocals seem to become more and more prevalent in the song. Like Barney's singing to you in a very Killing Joke / Sonic Youth kind of way, but he's still singing. And you know, those bands get way more melodic than Barney ever does. But in Apex Predator Easy Meat, you still got that absolutely ferocious fucking grinding death metal mix that Napalm Death have really made their own, and it's got this cold fucking sterile production to it as well, mixed in with these new elements of like these clean vocals, which at first is fucking bizarre. But if you remember when Cattle Decapitation first started doing clean kind of singing vocals, even though they're not super clean really, everyone was like, "Oh, what the fuck is this?" But now that's a staple of Cattle Decapitation's sound, and a similar kind of thing is happening here with Apex Predator Easy Meat. There is the song, is it Slum Landlord or Dear Slum Landlord? I can't remember off the top of my head, but like, let me just double check this name of that song in case I'm getting it wrong. But that is got the you know, it's got that real fucking like marching swans kind of fucking you know, beat to it, that like slave ship back and forth heave ho that I hear people talking about the early Swan stuff, and that is perfect way to describe some of this stuff on here. The song smashes single digit, 1 minute 26 seconds. Fuck you if you think Napalm Death can't do grindcore in 2015, because that song is fucking outstanding. And they still play it live now. You know, it's not just a random album that they did and forgot about. Like, they still play songs off this live. You know, it's fucking amazing. In 8th place, then, even better than that, is the Smear Campaign album from 2006. Now, this was to me, I find a sister album from the one that came before. But again, it has this like ferocity that they were missing throughout the 90s, and they really started to perfect it into its own mix of death metal and grindcore. And on Smear Campaign, I think they perfected that probably more on other albums, but this is probably the most polished and straightforward account of that. Again, you have singles which are actually quite catchy, actually get people into the band, like Sink Fast, Let Go. I don't know if that was a single, actually. And the other one was fucking, what was it called? When All Is Said and Done. Again, very catchy for Napalm Death, but this is what I'm saying. It makes like the perfect package to put forward to outsiders who don't necessarily know Napalm Death. Then Smear Campaign is one of those packages. It's one of those albums that's like, yeah, you like this. They got more mental shit than this, but try this, you know? Because this is a fucking well-made album. I also really like the intro to this album, Welshmerts. They used to open It probably just because I saw them a fuckload on this tour, but they used to open their gigs with Welshmits, and I really liked that slow opening song. To kick off the fucking carnage of an Napalm Death show. But yeah, Smear Campaign, fucking great. In 7th place is fuck's sake. You know what? I like to put these videos up unedited because you can realise, unlike the retrospectives, which are more like proper YouTube videos, these are just stream of consciousness, right? Me just talking about bands. I don't have a script. I'm just talking about fucking bands, and I think it captures like this is why I love this. Here's some raw fucking thoughts for you about this band, and I don't want to edit these videos, so you can also see how much of a fucking idiot I am and how much I trip over my words by me releasing these without any editing. So yeah, anyway, Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism at number 7. Again, this builds off what Apex Predator Easy Meat did. Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism. What? Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism. What a fucking mouthful that is. Now, this was released in September 2020, well into the lockdown of the COVID end times. In fact, I think Napalm Death was the last band that I saw live before the lockdown started, and they were touring off the back of the EP that came before this album, and this album I think was needed by a lot of people that were maybe lost a bit, and heavy music, this whole touring and brutal music kind of scenes kind of all ground to a halt, as did any music scene really. And this was a hell of a fucking shot in the arm. We're still here. We've released this fucking absolute mental album again, and those like Killing Joke, fucking Sonic Youth, Swans kind of influences are more prevalent here than ever, and they still mix that even more. It's not like they're mixing it like elements of that and elements of grind and elements of death metal. It's not just those three elements, just like in turn. By this point, by the time the Throes of Joy has come out, those elements are all one thing, and that is what Napalm Death now do. That is why Napalm Death is so unique, I think. After all these years of, like I said earlier, maybe not having an identity and jumping between different genres, they finally have created a sound that's all their own by mixing various things from various parts of the musical world. It really is quite exciting, and it is really quite special. And I can't wait to hear what Napalm Death come out with next, because it's been it's 3 years now since this came out soon, and I reckon we do another Napalm Death record soon. It took 5 years to do this one between Apex Predator and Throes of Joy. There was 5 years, so hopefully we won't have to wait that long. Anyway, some standout tracks on Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism would be Contagion, the opening, the factoid straight in off the off the bat there, and Invigorating Clutches. Well, they still play that live. I really like A Belly Full of Salt and Spleen as well. Really interesting closing track there, to be honest. And it's really an interesting mix of stuff. And like I said, it really makes Napalm Death their own thing now. They've always ruled, but this is their own sound. They finally have, I think, a really unique identity. Anyway, I'll get off Napalm Death's dick and we'll move on to the next one in the list. Number 6, Time Waits for No Slave. Now, Time Waits for No Slave came in the late 2000s, and it came after Smear Campaign, which was potentially a little bit polished, but I don't know if this was like reactionary to that, because Time Waits for No Slave retains the polished, production that came from Smear Campaign. But fuck me, is this a brutal record? Like to me, it's the all singing, all dancing high point to the 2000s era Napalm Death revival. Probably, as you might have noticed, I think The Code is Red, Long Live the Code, which we haven't got to yet because it's higher up the list, is my favourite in regards to the songs. But Time Waits for No Slave is a monument to Napalm Death's unique grindcore death metal crossover. and the many styles and genres that Napalm Death can mix into it. It's like I said, we just hailed Throes of Joy as being some sort of experimental, masterpiece for the band that they finally reached their zenith. We cannot argue that Napalm Death hasn't been blending all sorts of extreme music together, for years now. And Time Waits for No Slave is a perfect, example of that. This is absolutely fucking brutal. It's one of the hardest hitting Napalm Death records. Don't let the fairly overproduced album cover make you think like, oh, this is just another death grind or another death metal record. No, this is savage, and it's really, really, really good, and I really highly recommend it, of course. But of course, there's more, and as I just said, I just mentioned this one. In number 5 is The Code is Red, Long Live the Code. This was the first Napalm Death record that I bought new. So this came out when I was discovering Napalm Death. I was turned on to Napalm Death by a school teacher of all people, and then I happened to read this discography review of them in Metal Hammer of all places, and I kind of latched onto the fact that they had like 5-second songs and all sorts of crazy shit like that. But yeah, when I was like going back and discovering the old Napalm Death, the Code is Red came out when I was in high school, and it was the first Napalm Death record I bought new, and for that reason I suppose it probably has a special place in my heart. Like I said just now, Time Waits for No Slave is probably objectively better, but I prefer the songs on The Code is Red, Long Live the Code. On The Code is Red, the production is far rougher than what would follow on Smear Campaign and on Time Waits. On this first kind of the 3 coloured trilogy, as I like to call it, because The Code is Red has a red album cover, and then Smear Campaign has a blue album cover, and then Time Waits for No Slave has like an orangey yellow album cover. But yeah, I mean, this thing followed up Order of the Leech, which we spoke about earlier, and this may have lost some of the speed, like the absolute fucking cocaine-fueled speed of Order of the Leech, but it doesn't suffer for it. It has a slightly better scope to it. And I'm not saying this isn't fast, because it's fucking super fast. The second track, Right You Are, is 53 seconds long, which is just fucking outstanding. And that is like proper old school fucking, grindcore speed there, to be honest. I really like Diplomatic Immunity, which comes in third. That's just over a minute and a half long as well. The first track on Your Silence is Deafening was released as a single. The Code is Red, Long Live the Code, the title track, also very, very catchy. Jamie Jaster from fucking Hatebreed appears on a bunch of the songs, but they're not particularly that good, to be honest with you. Jeff Walker from Carcass is on here as well. Notably, this is before the Carcass reunions. And also Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys appears on the song The Great and the Good, which is, to be honest, pretty fucking bad, but it's really interesting to hear, to be honest, the collaboration between Napalm Death and Jello Biafra. Another really good song that I like on this is Morale, last but one song, Morale, and it kind of hints at the We Will Do More stuff that sounds like Swans that would come later, in their career. So yeah, I listed all those songs because these are amazing, and these are the songs that really stand out to me even now. As time has gone on, and I'm pretty much familiar with the entire Napalm Death discography. This is still one of my favorites there. So from this point, we are in classics territory. If you're familiar with Napalm Death, you'll notice that I haven't mentioned quite a considerable number of, very important albums. So without further ado, let's take a sip of coffee. And in fourth place, we have Utopia Banished from 1992. So this was the first album that the band did with Danny Herrera on drums after losing the legendary, the man, the myth, the legend, Mick Harris. He kind of left. He wasn't particularly happy with the new direction that Napalm Death had, which was, death metal, I suppose. And, or maybe not say he wasn't happy with that direction. I think it's more he just got a bit tired of it. And he was doing like Scorn at the time, and I'm a huge Scorn fan. As I'm sure any watchers of the channel will know, we have the Scorn ranking and the Scorn retrospective you can watch. But yeah, Utopia Vanished, absolutely killer. You know what I mean? It's what can I say? It's some of the best early '90s death metal, to be honest. You know, songs like "I Abstain," "The World Keeps Turning." You know, it's just what's the other one? "Upwards" and "Uninterested" later on in the album. Fucking great, honestly, really is. Like it's pretty by numbers, but it's still really, really good, and it's still really brutal, really dry, horrible production, which is just great. It's not polished at all, you know, and it really sounds fantastic. And to be honest, there's better Napalm Death, but you know, this is still a legendary historical record from them. You could probably guess what's coming next, because there's one that's very similar, released 2 years earlier. In number 3 is Harmony Corruption from 1990. Now, this is the big turn of events. This is when Napalm Death stopped grindcore initially. This is when, right at the turn of the 90s, for some reason, they decided to just not do grindcore anymore. They lost a whole bunch of members. They lost Bill Steer. They lost Lee Dorian. So Shane Embry and Mick Harris, they got Jesse Pintado. Did I say that right? Jesse Pintado and Mitch Harris on guitars, 2 guitarists. So first time in the history, I think they had like dual guitars. And they got Mark Barney Greenway in on vocals. So it's now, everyone just associates Napalm Death with Barney now. But, you know, this was their 3rd album before Barney comes into play. And yeah, the sound here initially probably alienated a lot of fans, because up until this point, Napalm Death were the grindcore band. Do you know what I mean? They were the band at the forefront of that scene, and all of a sudden they had just completely up sticks and changed genres of music and started doing death metal, you know, which a lot of people accused of being rather trendy. My view on old school death metal is twofold. I really love it, but at the same time it was massively oversaturated and there's a fucking lot of it, and I'm not surprised it burnt out so quickly, you know. Harmony Corruption, however, is fucking excellent, as you could probably tell, because it's really high up in the list. And, you know, it contains some fucking amazing songs, you know. The Truth Be Known, and The Chains That Bind Us, Malicious Intent, and, of course, the final song, Suffer the Children. Still a staple of the live show to this day. One of the best metal songs of all time, I reckon. Suffer the Children, it's got to be, isn't it? You know, it would be one thing if Napalm Death just fucking stopped doing grindcore, changed to death metal, and it was shit. That would be one thing. But Napalm Death stopped doing grindcore, changed to death metal, and it was fucking amazing. So at least there's that, you know. I can see why people might have been pissed off in 1990, especially if you were, you know, like a punk or crusty and you didn't really get this whole fucking death metal shit. And then like Napalm Death, who started as a punk band, you know, then kind of went into the grindcore scene, and then all of a sudden fucking you turned into death metal, you would be thinking like, what the fuck is going on here? But yeah, Suffer the Children is fucking outstanding, and Harmony Corruption is absolutely fucking outstanding. In second place is Scum from 1987. Second place is Scum. Scum is honestly a mess. It is, you know, it is one of the most influential records of all time in regards to extreme metal. It is one of the most important extreme metal records of all time. It is considered more or less to be like the Black Sabbath self-titled of the grindcore world. It was the start of the whole grindcore thing. Yeah, there were grindcore bands before it. Won't get into that argument now. We could talk about that another time. I know you've got like Siege and fucking all those other bands. But it's just like, what I'm talking about here is that this was like lightning in a bottle shit, you know? The lineup of this band is completely different between side A and side B. That never gets old to me. They are basically 2 different recordings by 2 different bands featuring the same drummer. You know, side A feels completely different to side A. And like I said, Scum is a mess. To claim that it's like some beacon of, what grindcore should be is wrong, but it still fucking blew everybody away when it came out in 1987, when it finally got released, and it put Europe Records on the map. And that art is just absolutely fucking iconic, absolutely iconic artwork. And you know, what can I say? It's one of my favorite albums of all time. I prefer side B. It has a grindier sound, if I could be so
trite in my descriptions of it. Side A is more of like a bad kind of crusty sound that goes into blasts every now and then. Side B is just flat out fucking proto grindcore. You know, it's just non-stop, energy and anger and just chaos and absolutely unbelievable, to be honest. And, you know, if you've never heard it, you've got to hear it at least once. It has been imitated 1,000,000 times. So why listen to imitations? Come and listen to the first, you know, the Godfathers, as it were. Listen to Scum. Number one then is more or less the side B of Scum, but then perfected to literally nothing is perfect. I'm one of those people that thinks nothing is perfect, right? Because you don't know. How can you honestly say something is perfect when you've not experienced everything that's out there or could come? You know, the whole rating system of perfect could change. So nothing is perfect. You don't know. You never will know. But this is close to fucking perfect. And number one, From Enslavement to Obliteration from 1988. It is the follow-up record to Scum. It has Lee Dorian of Cathedral fame on vocals. Mick Harris on drums. Bill Steer from Carcass on guitar. And Shane Embry, of course. Good old Shane, still going with Napalm on drums. Now this is just absolutely fucking unstoppable bonkers. Just look at the album cover. The album cover should give you an accurate representation of what this sounds like. And, you know, it's still, at first it's like, oh, that's not as good as Scum, is it? You know, but this accurately describes what this fucking album sounds like. This album is a fucking beast. It's an absolute beast. Again, considering they worked these influences into their later stuff, the opening track, Evolved as One, sounds so much like Filth era Swans. It is like, they're obviously biting their style. Man's World, Lucid Fairy Tale, Private Death, Unchallenged Hate, Retreat to Nowhere, From Enslavement to Obliteration, Social Sterility, Inconceivable, Mentally Murdered, Make Way, and my version had some versions have the song Dead and Your Achievement, which kind of like You Suffer, the 1 second song. Those two are on there as well. It's just carnage. It's so much fucking tighter than Scum. It is got like a deeper, nastier production than Scum. Fucking blast beats, considering they're done with 1 foot. These aren't like double pedal fucking blasts that posers like me do. These are like 1 foot blast beats, and it's just absolutely fucking banshee fucking nuts drums. Just I haven't got words for it, how fucking crazy these drums are. But yeah, this whole thing is just an absolute fucking non-stop headache from start to finish in the best way possible. And, you know, it is one of the best grindcore records of all time. I cannot really say any more than that. So it has to be number one, regardless of, you know, what I think of the rest of the discography and how good the band is these days. From Enslavement to Obliteration still has to be number one. So there we have it. Guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between, thank you so much for listening to the Napalm Death discography ranking. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you enjoyed the video. How are you feeling about these new stream of consciousness fucking just unedited fucking diatribes, no pun intended? You know, how do you think they work? Do you think I need to go back to editing the videos? Because I feel like my stuff kind of feels a bit fucking unprofessional anyway, so I figured, well, I waste my time editing, I could just give more content and more fun by just chucking out these like podcasts, I guess, more than anything else. But either way, comment or don't. Love ya. I'll catch you again on my next video. This has been Napalm Death. Check out some of these fucking albums. They are really good. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers now.